exciting episode of Get Behind Me, Not Stay There. Today we're very privileged to have with us Ruth Nolan from San Bernardino, California. And she's the author, a poet, of course you all know that. And she works on several projects that we're going to get into a little bit. And welcome, Ruth.
Welcome, hi, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, we've talked a lot about you, your work, and we actually did an interview with Marion from the Amanda Institute, and she had nothing but just all these praises to say about you. And now we finally get to meet you and interview you, and it's such a treat for us. And we'd like to just hear a little bit about what you're working on right now. Tell us a little bit about your book, No Place For A Purtian, which is a great title, by the way. The only title I can think of that's better is Get Behind Me, Not Stay There. Maybe I'm a little prejudiced with that.
Well, I consider myself basically a California writer. I'm a native of California and primarily focusing on the inland areas. Born in San Bernardino, raised in the Mojave Desert, worked as a firefighter for the BLM, doing hotshot helicopter work, and just spent most of my adult life until the last 5 or 6 years just basically wandering out in the desert, metaphorically and literally.
Oh, okay. There was a famous guy that wandered out in the desert for a lot of years. A lot of people talk about it, right? Who he was.
Oh. Well, and
his name wasn't Joshua, but it was really close.
Yeah. It was Ruth.
Yes, it was Ruth. Yeah, Joshua's younger sister Ruth.
From the Bible.
Yeah.
So I primarily, I write in all genres. I primarily have been publishing poetry, but I'm making a kind of a leap into prose and feature something known as, it's been coined cultural journalism for KCET Artbound Los Angeles, which is a new project coordinated by KCET in Southern California to feature cultural arts pieces by different writers, journalists, artists, people throughout Central and Southern California.
Yeah, KCET, they're pretty big. I remember, they always had these really, cool projects going on when I was living in Los Angeles, and they would, I'd always see their magazine articles, and back then when people had TV guides, and there was always stuff about that.
Yeah, now they've totally switched into the, online platform blogging, and they are planning to make some of the columns, I'm not sure if mine will be, but they're actually planning on starting a TV series.
Oh,
so
cool.
We're going to have feature shows also. So that's something that I'm kind of really excited about that I just started doing. About my book, No Place For A Purtian, I compiled that because I'm a professor over at College of the Desert in Palm Springs, and I teach there. I focus on desert literature and creative writing, and I wanted my students to have a collected reader of good literary works that were also accessible and not too hard to read.
Right.
So stuff that just really would come to represent and show them a little bit about where they live. And so I put this together. This was actually a sort of a sequel to the book Inlandia, which is about Riverside, San Bernardino, and that was tied in with the Inlandia Institute, which you already mentioned.
Right.
And so I offered to do this next book and put this together. And it's gotten a lot of good critical feedback. And the title actually came from a poem, one of the poems in the book.
Oh.
And this poem was written by a man who went to World War II. He was served, came home, and he spent a year wandering in Death Valley. And he wrote this whole book of poetry.
Death Valley.
Can you believe that? And then he went on to become a famous wallpaper designer in San Francisco.
I heard something about
It's really crazy.
I don't mean to
take
up your train of thought, but no, I heard something about Death Valley, about how hey, it doesn't describe the place. It's not a Death Valley. It's just what the
Right.
the settlers coming through on the covered wagons would call it, or something like
It's
that.
fascinating that you say that because I actually have a piece in this book that is the Shoshone Indian Homeland Statement from the Shoshone, Timbisha Shoshone of Death Valley elder Pauline Estidis. And that tribe had to fight for 50 years just to get tribal recognition. And then some of their lands have been repatriated to them. And so in the piece that I have in this book, where she was testifying to Congress about who they are and what their homeland is, she actually says that they don't like the name Death Valley. That's an unfortunate name that was given by the white settlers. The famous story, the William Lewis Manley story. And she said, this is just so classic, she said, all they had to do ask us where the water was. Doesn't that just put a whole different spin on a
Yeah,
lot of
you know, really, but it
Westward
really,
movement
it does,
history?
but I guess, it would, you know, I mean, if you're, you know, in extreme heat and you don't know where the water is, I guess it could kind of feel like a dead
It
valley.
wasn't the hot time of year when they went there.
Every time is a hot time of year.
Well, I guess if you're from there. But, and they also, the Shoshone call it tupa. It's named after one of the red clays that are in the mountain.
Oh, okay.
So in their view, that actually means place of life. So the Native American name of the place is completely diametrically different to what the Anglo people named it when they came through.
Right, just two different points of view.
Very vastly different points of view. And I don't know, just somehow it just speaks so much about just cultural differences. And, you know, our country's moving towards sustainable, renewable types of living. And so you think, wow, you know, that people would think about things like that. You know, like how do you live in a place without, you know, going through it and not really understanding where you're at.
Right, you know, and it's, you know, like nowadays, you know, we have, you know, so much technology that, you know, you can live anywhere, you can live on the moon, it doesn't really matter. You know, we can do that. But back then, you know, a couple hundred years ago, you know, you really had to have your wits about you.
Yeah.
You know, you had to really be in touch with, you know, nature and,
Yeah.
you know, what's going on, or you just didn't make it very long.
Right, it was very difficult. But I think Native American people pretty much have had it down. And I think it's really neat that there's a lot of movement towards going back, you know, to renewing a lot of revival or renewal of Native American knowledge and plant usage and culture. I think that's really important for
You know, I've
survival,
noticed,
basically.
no, I've noticed that, you know, and a lot of it, you know, to me, I'm just a simpleton from the Pacific Northwest. I'm just like, you know, yeah, you know, it's like, you know, technology, we've got all this new technology and, you know, all these things, and what they come up with is, yeah, you know what, I think we need to go back to a simpler time when, because, you know, it obviously worked.
Like the dam removal up here in the Northwest, the removal of dams and the restoration of salmon. You know, we need more of that, definitely, I think.
So, you know, your book, it's published by Heyday Books. Good outfit, really good outfit. And you were mentioning that you were thinking about going into maybe writing something a little more conventional.
Well, the book I've done for Heyday is a collected anthology of pieces from Native American early history to contemporary writers. It includes, so it's a lot of different writers, and I do have one poem in there. And at this point, I'm aspiring to, I'm working on short stories, maybe a short story collection, and I do have 2 novel ideas in mind. So,
Oh, great.
and they're set in a desert, and I like to sort of think that I'm sort of maybe aspiring to developing a voice that's a little bit of a sensibility between Hunter S. Thompson and Anois Nin, with a little Jim Morrison thrown in there.
Oh, okay.
So, and maybe some Grace Slick also from the 60s.
Yeah.
So,
I like Grace Slick.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I just have some things, I mean, these are desert stories and they're kind of personal, but I want to sort of bring these things I've experienced, and they're about some very difficult subject matter as well. And I want to portray difficult subject matter in a way that shows that the desert is still sort of like this healing, you know, influential, transformational source. So that's sort of like going to be the main. So I think definitely I'm really a writer of place. The place really matters a lot. And that's, you know, the place is actually like a character in my stories.
Right.
I don't know why I just kind of thought of that just now, but it's true.
No, it is.
The desert has a voice, you know.
Yeah, it's the, you know, the focal point.
Yeah.
And, yeah, well, we're looking forward to that when that comes out. You know, don't give away your ideas.
No, actually there's 2, and I don't even know where to start. But
You know, when we were sitting there talking about the, you know, the desert, and I was thinking, you know, like, well, you know, I know that you mentioned you were going to, you know, write something different. And the thing that came to my mind was like, wouldn't it be so cool to have like a book where like, somebody either from this time or even a little bit in the future, you know, that gets transported back, you know, 200, 300 years ago, you know, to the desert, and gets to learn all about their culture. See it from their point of view, because it's all brand new to them.
So you would be like living in a Native American village site in an oasis. And then, yeah, actually that's very interesting you say that, because I gave that as a writing prompt to some of my college students.
Oh, did you really?
Yes.
I
I said, imagine that you're living 300 years ago in a Kuya village. You know, what would be some things that you would really think were different than how you live, you know, in Palm Springs and air conditioners, you know, when it's 118 outside.
Maybe one of my professors had mentioned that to me, you know, who knows,
Yeah.
you know. obviously stuck in my head.
Right.
So do you prefer writing or teaching?
That's a really good question, because I do both, and it seems like everything I do kind of overlaps.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is a lot more private, and it's actually when you're a writer and a teacher, I mean, I think most writer teachers would say this, it can be very difficult to kind of get in a different mode, because teaching is very public, and writing tends to be kind of very inward
Right.
and private. So, I actually like doing both, you know, and I was talking, to a friend the other day about how I feel that the more I'm stepping into being a writer, my daughter's grown up, and I raised her as a full-time single mom and a full-time teacher, and just now the last 5 years really pumping it up as a writer. And I just see how my own teaching strategies with my students are now informing my own writing. So it's kind of very interesting to see, I'm actually starting to apply some of my own writing instruction to myself. So I really like doing both. I really love to teach, and I call myself a performance professor because
But you are.
yeah, I just get up there and do it, and it's very much like a poetry event. Definitely it's grounded in subject and pedagogy, but I'm also just really making it very, very creative as I go along, and very much involving, kind of teach in a way where I'm very inclusive of everybody. And what's really rewarding for me is getting kids who've never written a poem in their lives to get up and read poetry.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I have never written a poem in my life.
Well, you're going to now that you met me. Get ready.
And I know you're a poet, and why don't you read us, a poem,
Okay.
and
Happy to.
maybe tell us a little bit about it.
Okay.
Oh.
I have a poem.
Okay.
It's called Mirage. And all my poems are based on true stories, pretty much, even though they're very surreal.
Uh-huh.
So this one, there's a lot of really, really amazing places in the desert where I've spent time. This one's called Mirage, and it actually is based on a true story that took place at Kelso Sand Dunes, which is in the East Mojave Preserve. My 10-year-old daughter is feeling brave, so we go rock hunting today, exploring far beyond the last dirt road. Just she and I, no dad. We see the sand dunes from miles away, some hallucinogenic scene from the Sahara, camel humps rising from the flat desert floor. My daughter wants to climb them, but there's no sure way to guess how far away they are, no sure measure to tell how tall. I tell her it's not safe to hike mountains, so unstable, hills that shift in light winds. Our boots would fill with sand, and we'd sink like thirsty prospectors, come to find buried treasure, lured by promises of silver and gold, the rattlesnakes' hypnotic charms.
Wow, I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, I was often telling Cyrus Emerson, the producer of the show, that he is a poet, and he's into poetry, and he's always, talking about it. And I thought, I can appreciate a good poem when I hear it, but most of the time, I just don't get it,
Well, I had the same experience. And I'm a poetry professor at a college. It's very important to me because I grew up in the desert. I didn't, have the East Coast background or the really steeped in, academic. Basically in the desert you have to make up your own recreation. You live in the middle of nowhere. So it's really important to me, I guess, since I didn't have a lot of guidance as a writer in my younger years. I really want everything I write to be easy to understand. I want it to be really clear and direct. I want people that feel like they're participating in it, even while maybe at the same time I'm kind of touching on some very complicated themes.
Right.
Like, what is a mother and daughter doing out in the middle of nowhere? Where's the dad? Then we get into like this idea that maybe this poem is like a search for identity. In the desert, it's like you can see everything you are, and yet you see that there's nothing, that it's just very surreal.
Right.
There's no measure, where's space and time. So hopefully my poetry has that quality. Someone like you that doesn't like to read it can say, oh, that was kind of
it's not that I don't like to read it. If I hear a poem like your poem, I hear it and I like it, and it's good. But at the same time, if I had a book of poetry, it's not so much that I wouldn't appreciate it. It's just that I would get lost in it, and so in turn I would get a little frustrated. I don't get it.
Well,
Everyone's getting these deep, dark meanings out of it, and I don't.
Well, poetry poetry is, really the original form of language. It's the start of civilizations, and everything was, before we had written language, everything was in poetry. So poetry is really meant to be heard, and I think that's been lost in a lot of public since.
That's an excellent point.
And I think
Nobody
that's why.
nobody ever really explained it to me like that, because
Right.
as I say, I'm like, I hear it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it, that's
Right.
cool. But if I read it, I'm
Right.
like, yeah.
And what's funny is writing it and then hearing yourself read it out loud, very different experience also. So I have to really, when I'm writing poetry, I'm reading it out loud. Because then I get lost even in the process of writing it if I don't hear it. It gets more abstract, isn't it? So
Yeah, it is.
Very
It's
interesting.
it's very interesting. Talked a lot about the desert. So I'm just asking
get away from-
this burning question. I've obviously been to the
Sure,
desert.
okay.
Well, I don't know what's obviously, but I have been to the desert many, 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 many times. And it just seems to me, when you look at literature, especially in music, everyone just seems to gravitate. They go through this. I'm more of an East Coast guy, New York City, London, that kind of thing. You real cosmopolitan stuff. But then everybody when I want to know the meaning of life, and when I want to get grounded,
yeah.
they all seem to gravitate towards the desert. Like whether it's Graham Parsons or it's Bono.
Right. U2, the Joshua Tree. I know exactly where he took that picture. When that album came out, I said, "Oh my God!" The U2 was right here where I live.
Right.
And I was like, "Why didn't I see them?"
I think they have been back and actually done workshops there.
Really?
Yeah.
Music workshops.
Yeah, they did music workshops for. I know that Bono did that, and I'm not sure if but he usually takes the edge with him everywhere he goes. So.
Just have to catch that next time. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of appeal to the desert as sort of this iconic place of restoration and healing and renewal. And that's kind of true in a lot of religions too. Like you look at the
I think
Bible,
that's
for
something to
example.
do with Jesus
Jesus,
walking the 40
exactly.
years in the desert.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote, I like to use this quote from John Steinbeck, who everybody knows pretty much who that is, a famous American writer. And he said, "It seems to be in the desert that the great concepts of oneness and majesty are born." So he wrote an essay in his book, Travels with Charlie, a little vignette, and he was saying...
I asked him not to write that.
Huh?
I asked him not to write that, by the way.
Yeah. Charlie should have written it. So, and he talks about how, his time when he drove through the Mojave, and he kind of went in this little meditation about, because he wrote this in 1960 and the whole nuclear arms race was really big. He said, if society just caves in on itself, that out in the desert there's going to be some grizzled old prospector and his wife, surviving no matter what happens. And, in a lot of post-apocalyptic dystopian literature is really big right now. A lot of writers are writing in that genre, wonder why it's 2012. And a lot of these stories are taking place in the desert. There's a lot of dystopian, post-apocalyptic. Hari Kunzru, the author, for example. So there's a lot of stuff, that even now, as we're all kind of thinking, is the world going to end? It's 2012. We're writers too,
It's not, by the way.
are migrating. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you clarified that for me. So,
Just here to help.
yeah, another thing too, and I would like to write about this, there are a lot of music videos in pop music
There
that
are.
have been filmed in the desert. And one thing when I did this Puritan book, I had in mind a number of authors that I read in college and through the years, Aldous Huxley, Sylvia Plath, people I knew had written about the desert. But the amount of stuff I found from people that have written, and people you would never guess who have written about the desert. Someone, Sylvia Plath, would you ever have guessed that she would have taken a road trip through the Mojave Desert and written a poem?
No.
It's just really amazing. So I continue to be surprised at the amount of material that's out there with writers about the desert.
It's kind of like maybe it's just because you're a professor and all that stuff, but I find my mind just going, overtime here, because every time you come up with some sort of suggestion or idea or whatever, I just start clicking on these ideas. And you mentioned a lot of musical artists, record videos
Yeah.
in the desert, and I don't know if they actually went to the desert or they cut them in or whatever, but however they made that, the desert is the one of the characters, in the music video. Would be a great, because you mentioned you were going to do a TV show. you should do a collage of all the different artists that have put the,
That would be very cool.
like Sting comes to mind with this Desert Rose, and
Yeah, and also in terms of music as well.
yeah,
And I'm sorry, in terms of film, I just wrote a column. My new column for the KCET Artbound is about films. I actually picked this idea of filmmakers who are looking to the Salton Sea area, which is near Palm Springs, and it's kind of been a very controversial place. Like, oh, it used to be a big place, and it got real salty, and they have fish die-offs, and San Diego wants the water, and there's been characterizations of it in film in very like dark, end of the road for people. And I just wrote my newest column about several films that actually showed as a place of renewal and people going there to start their lives over. And so film has the same thing as well as music videos.
Right.
Just film in general, there's been a lot of stuff filmed in the desert.
When I think the desert, in film, when I think the desert, the first thing that comes to mind on film is Gunga Din, man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and because there's every continent has a desert.
Yeah. I never really thought about that before, but it's true.
Yeah, I think French Foreign Legion,
Yeah.
Sahara Desert.
Yeah.
All the
South America. Well, it's certain parts of the globe. You go around the globe, they're in certain latitudes.
India.
So that also is very interesting because it makes you think of the California desert where I'm kind of situated in my writing, but there's also definitely a global connection to the concept of a desert,
Right.
to the idea or the existence of deserts, and how forbidding they are and how isolated and yet how important they are to people.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just kind of like, I think people get there in tune because of spirituality when they go to the desert, in my humble opinion, because like a ghost path, because every desert at one time was a lush,
That's right.
mountain range, or, was underwater,
Yeah.
and then it's like, you can almost feel, the civilizations of past. That were
Yeah, I
there.
definitely feel that a lot, and in the Salton Sea in particular, which was created accidentally when someone was trying to divert Colorado River water, just a little over 100 years ago, and it flowed for 2 years before they got the Colorado River back on course. But that is part of an ancient lake system, and the Gulf of California used to actually come all the way up almost to Palm Springs.
I did not know
The whole
that.
entire valley. Salton Sea is 200 feet under sea level. And then the rest, huge areas of the rest of the California desert were big inland lakes after the ice ages. So Death Valley is an ancient lake. And,
See?
they're connected by water, by river systems. So, you think I can really feel that presence of water even though it's so lacking in water. The desert is full of like paradoxes,
Right.
that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. So, you probably, I want to touch a little bit on your photography, because I was going to say, you've probably taken a lot of pictures out there.
Yeah, I have. My pictures, one thing I've been noticing, because I have taken pictures for years, and it's been real fun to jump in from slide photography with my 35 millimeter Pentax K1000 into the digital era. And as I compile slideshows, digitally, I'm noticing that I've really taken a lot of photos of the desert that are very colorful. And not just sunsets, but compared to like a lot of other desert photography where people are out just doing like long shots, and I feel like the desert really seems to be, for most people, probably very kind of a black and white place. And somehow I'm really excited that my photography reveals a lot of color, and not just with actual color, but with like subject and different people I've been getting in places. So, I mean, I think that's something that I'm kind of proud of as a photographer and a writer. And I do combine both when I do readings and lectures. I like to show my desert slides in the background while I'm talking.
Right.
And what's really neat is I even have slides that are pictures of other desert slides. And I've been really amazed to see just how much richness I've pulled out of the fabric. Because, I don't know how you feel, but most people don't live in the desert. Let's say you're driving from LA to Las Vegas.
Right.
And you're going through this thinking, oh my God, there's nothing out here. It's just brown and dead, right?
There's a dinosaur.
And there's one dinosaur. And then, we just can't wait to get to Vegas. Oh, it's just the middle of nowhere, it's barren. And yet, maybe because I've spent so much time, and not just as an adult, like celebrating, but as a kid too, I've managed, and maybe my imagination has influenced that I really see it as a really colorful, rich place in ways that maybe the casual observer just can't. And it's funny, I just thought about all that as I was saying it, but it's pretty cool. So.
That is cool, and that's a good observation because on trips into Vegas, and the things that stick out were we would actually on the way to do a picnic in like a little sand dune.
Yeah.
And it was quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
But it was different because like there was this, it's miles, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, nothing.
Right.
We do the picnic and then we'd see the dinosaur and then.
You're talking about going that direction out towards Palm Springs, right? The cabins on dinosaurs.
Right.
Yeah, they're still there. Yeah. Just be careful in sand dunes because sidewinder rattlesnakes like to hide in.
Oh.
Ever since I learned that, I'm too scared. I used to hang out in sand dunes all the time. Sadly, most of the sand dunes down there in the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs area are gone. Plowed them all over for development.
That's too bad.
It's really sad.
Well, Ruth, you wear a lot of hats. I gotta tell you, man, you wear a lot of hats, and I'm sure you've heard this question before, and it's almost impossible. I mean, photography, writing, teaching, poetry. Do you just every day get up and say today's poetry day, or is there one passion that you have where you say to yourself, what, if I could, I would do this all the time. If I could make a living at this is what I would do.
Well, I've thought about this, and I actually kind of think if you go to a rave, that kind of scene with the light show and all the DJ and the different sounds, and it's all over the place. Right. That's kind of how I function, I think, artistically. I'm sort of like a DJ spinning and mixing things up. I like that broken up mixed, but how you sort of create a flow with all that. Mm-hmm. That's how I think. I don't really wake up unless I have a deadline or something. Oh, I gotta write a column, I have a deadline. But it kind of just all flows together, I think. And I mean, I kind of like to write, and there's certain things I want to write, certain audiences maybe I want to reach, like the 2 books I'm working on, and I'm not sure that I can do that quite through poetry. However, I'm also playing with sort of breaking up the form of the novel, where I'm going to be bringing in poetry in different forms. So, that's sort of a little bit of cutting edge types of writing, where writers they're jumping back and forth, where you think, oh, it's just a poetry book or just a novel.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment because I would disagree with that because I don't think that's the case, man.
Really?
Yeah, I think that writers and artistic people, and I think everyone is artistic, by the way. Whether
it depends on how much you tune into it.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Because the guy that drives the trash truck, has the same surreal thoughts that we all do. He just doesn't know how to articulate it. I heard an interesting comment once about a guy that was very famous. We talked about him earlier about Joan Didion.
Right, John.
And when he got killed, and all the people were talking about him, and his first wife, made a comment that was really kind of right to the point. She goes, "How do you think the world